your speech sort of revolved around, not a lot, but a portion of it revolved around Senator Graham's filibuster of the MOHELA package.
Right.
What would you have done differently if you were in the Senate when that package was being deliberated?
I think the thing that was lacking, and the thing that any professional person would have done, is number one, acknowledge that the Lewis and Clark Initiative was good for this university and good for this community. And start out with that proposition. And then move to any disagreement that he had on any specific issue. The filibustering right out of the box on the entire issue is frankly what annoyed the fellow senators so much that they simply were not going to occupy any more time with handling something in that childish and unprofessional way. And it caused this community to lose, well, now after this session, total probably about $60 million. Fortunately, Ed Robb brought some of that money back. But again, we lost an awful lot.
Now, the rationale he did for filibustering that was because there were restrictions on research, mainly stem cell research. Did you agree with those restrictions on the buildings?
No, I don't agree with that. But the issue is not enough was done. And I'll give you an example. I used in my speech, for example, the settlement with Ameren, which was a $179 million settlement. Very complex issues and very contentious. But when you get working professionals in a room, people who know how to negotiate and know how to bargain on issues, know what's important, know how to persuade people, which is the most important thing, you can get beyond those things. And simply that is what was lacking in that process was. And I will tell you, I've talked to several people who were involved in that process, and it was the arrogance and the belligerence and the lack of professionalism that basically cost the university the money.
So you were for Amendment 2?
Yeah, I agree. We absolutely have to have our research, our key research institution, with the ability to do the types of research that keep it on par with its peer universities throughout this country.
Okay. You were Deputy Director of the Department of Natural Resources, and one of the issues that was unresolved last session, didn't really come up this session, that comes to mind is the CAFO issue. And the Department of Natural Resources dealt with that issue. What is sort of your take on that whole situation?
I think there are several facets to the CAFO issue. Number one is you have areas of Missouri that were traditionally more rural. You have more and more people moving to those areas who don't like some of the smells and some of the things that go along with animal agriculture. But the issue is agriculture is still the #1 industry in the state of Missouri. And this state could not survive without the strength of its agriculture. And the other issue too, and it is as a father of 3, and I've talked to other parents about this, people are concerned, for example, that toys that they get for their kids come from China. And there's frequently lead in those toys, and you see the recalls. I think people are going to be much more concerned if we lose our agricultural strength in this state and in this country, and all of our food, particularly our meat products and our dairy products, start coming from China and other countries where you simply don't have the health and safety regulations that we enjoy and take for granted in this state.
Okay, so Koster's bill in 2007, would that be a good way to go, or would it have had to been changed to more of your liking?
I'm trying to remember because there were so many versions of Senator Koster's bill. I think it started out maybe on the right track. I think by the end, it had so many things tacked onto it and so many changes that I think that's why it didn't pass.
All right.
I think we need to acknowledge that there are some people who feel the effects of those facilities and have a legitimate issue. I think we also have to recognize that they haven't invented the pig yet that doesn't stink. Animal agriculture is an extremely important part of our economy. And we've got to maintain it.
All right, some quick issues. Campaign finance limits, would you have voted to rescind them?
Well, that's interesting because I've been reading on that issue, and that's, for example, an issue I know that our current senator actually sided with the Republicans on that issue and voted to rescind those limits. As somebody who's going through the campaign process, it is difficult to raise the amount of money that needs to be raised to get a message out with those limits. I think the bigger issue, though, on that is the disclosure issue. And I do support the fact that now, with the new legislation, everyone who brings in money is going to have to say where it comes from. Because I think we've seen too many times, especially in some of the cases that I've been involved in, where you have situations where you have candidates who are getting money over the limits through legislative committees and other things, which is perfectly legal, but it doesn't tell the public where their money comes from. And I think from the perspective of the public wanting to know, and they should know where that money comes from, I think the recent legislation is a good idea.
Photo ID, which side of the fence would you have gone on?
You know, on the photo ID issue, under the Missouri Constitution and the implementing statutes that go with it, you're required to show a photo ID to register. You must register at least 1 month before the election or you can't vote. I'm still not quite so sure why it is not an issue to have to show a photo ID to register to vote, but then to vote, it's an inconvenience or somehow impediment to voting. My personal opinion is I don't really think it is an impediment to voting. I think when you think about the fact that you need a photo ID, I was just out of town. I had to have an ID to get on the plane, to fly there and to fly back. I had to have a photo ID to get my hotel room. You have to have a photo ID to rent a movie. When you look at the electoral process and the fact that we don't hold anything in this country more important than our elections, I think you can never have too many safeguards in place to make sure that those elections are fair and that those elections are honest and that we are truly getting the will of the people when we get those elections.
One last question, I'll let you go. Your opinion on the bill that also didn't pass this year regarding coerced abortions, and if you want to explain your position on that issue, which very well could be a big issue if Hulshoff or Steelman are elected, that would be an opportunity.
I'll tell you, that's probably a bill that I need to study a little more. But one thing about that bill is the United States Supreme Court established what is legal and what is not legal as far as providing abortions in Roe v. Wade. We all know that. That's been a settled issue for a long time. One thing I don't know is necessarily if abortions are legal, how it can be a crime to coerce something that is otherwise legal. But again, that's an issue that I'd have to study.
And just would you consider yourself pro-choice, pro-life? How would you consider yourself?
I think the issue of abortion has been settled in this state. I think that we've met a balance. I think it's always going to be a divisive issue, but I think that we've reached a point in the state where we are at least a workable point so we can get past the issue and get to the more important issues of economic sustainability, environmental issues, all those other things that we need to divert our attention to. So I support the status quo.